Welcome to Eastlake. We are an inclusive faith community dedicated to the free search for truth and meaning, seeking to live out a more just and life-giving spirituality in the modern world. We see faith as less about doctrines and dogmas demanding total agreement, but a life to be lived, enjoyed, and given away to others. What unites us is a growing awareness that life is a gift and love is the point. We welcome the entire human family, regardless of race, age, creed, physical abilities, marital or economic status, gender identity, or sexual orientation. So if you are curious and have come to see, if you are tired and have come to rest, if you are grateful and have come to share, if you are journeying and have come to grow, if you are wounded and have come to heal, if you are joyful and have come to shine, welcome home. Today, Kristen Burchinal talks with Bethel Lee as we continue our series, Evolving Faith, Personal Stories of Spiritual Transformation. Please check the description for links to our quarterly Spotify playlist and guided meditation.
Okay, Eastlake, I am excited to be back with you today. I get the chance to talk with Bethel Lee as part of our Evolving Faith series. So everyone say hi to Bethel.
Hi.
And I'm really thrilled that you're joining me today because I feel like you have a really great story, but you're also part of our content team. And so it is both, I think, important and fun for the Eastlake community to hear more about you. And so this is going to be really great, I think. And I know bits and pieces about your story, but I'm excited to just talk with you and hear more about your journey. So thank you. Thanks for finding the time to do this with me.
Oh, thank you. Total honor. Really appreciate it. And even though in general, like an interviewish type thing is less work you would, right? Than like writing a talk or something. Mm-hmm. But like I have to say, especially this last week, as I was, getting ready for this to happen, like I was just thinking through everything that we might talk about, like thinking about my journey, and man, it brought a lot of feelings, and there's a lot there. So I appreciate having a reason to have to kind of digest all of that with you all. So thank you.
Yeah, I think that's part of the reason why I did this series too, is that it's important to look back. We don't often take time to look back or at least I don't. I'm just focused on today and what's next. And so taking time to look back really helps me see where I've come from, how I've grown, the things, even like some of these specific questions that I had to, like you said, the things that we had to process to be ready to do this. There was a lot that I hadn't thought about in a long time. So, yeah. Well, I would love for you to start with just giving people a glimpse of what was the street that you kind of grew up on? What was the worldview? What was the type of spirituality that you were sort of handed as you headed into the world?
So my dad became in Korea, growing up in Korea, he became the first Christian of his family line, I believe. And I'm so bad with some facts, especially when it comes to family things, but generally this is true. Like I'm pretty sure he became the first Christian, and that was because actually a death of a young friend kind of, I think, spiraled him into some existential questions. And I think he would say that he kind of felt in some ways different from his family, and he found his home in the church. So he became the first minister, and then it's a family of 9 children. And see, this is where I'm going to get it wrong, and my cousins will be like, Bethel, I just have all the numbers wrong, but something like 5 other brothers behind him all became ministers, I think. Something like that, 4. And then I think 2 sisters are married to ministers. Like it just became the family business or family thing to do. And then he came to the States again, I believe, to study. I think he already had like his degree from seminary, but then he came to immigrated to the States, I think to study some more or whatnot. I believe was sponsored by a church for that. And I believe the plan was to go back to Korea after a couple of years. And so we came to the States when I was under 2. I believe I was a year and 10 months. And then I have 2 older sisters above me. We're all 2 years apart. But then just stayed. And yeah, so he did like further theological studies here and was the minister of various churches. He started his own church. So church was our life, and it was the thing that instigated everything. It determined where we lived. It determined what our days were like. It determined who was in our lives. Like literally at one point, the church, I believe he planted a new church with a group of people, and so the church was our house. Like they bought the house to be the church as well. So the garage space was turned into the sanctuary space, and so literally the church was in our house. We never had any holiday that was just our family. It was always the church. Like everything was a church activity. So yeah, it was everything that we knew, and I think that gave me a lot of good practices, even as a young child, because like, for instance, our mom, every night, we'd have a little circle of my mom and my sisters, because my dad would be working, holding hands and praying together, like music being a part of your lives, because it's what you do, the worship. Even as a young child, like was this Lent? I feel like during the season of Lent or something, this particular church had the practice of people reserving slots this is when it was like a church building, to have an hour to be with God type of thing, which is, for a young kid, it kind of felt special to be so little and to be trusted to be alone with God and just talk to him. So, and then community, I think particularly for immigrant families, my gosh, like I don't think we would have been so lonely without that kind of made community, because it wasn't just church. We ate together, we did everything together. And so community is a huge part of it. But it was completely interwoven with our lives. And I just accepted all of it. Like I just believed what I was told. And I was all about it. Yeah, from as long as I can remember.
This is the one thing that I'm thinking of right now. I'm the youngest of 3 girls also. I didn't know that about you.
Oh, cool. Are you guys 2 years apart?
A little bit more. 3 and then 4. So, but
yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting. I have so many questions, but
I know. So that's so interesting. Okay, so then were your sisters that way too, where it was just like accepted and this is just what we did?
Yeah, that's exactly what I was wanted to ask you about your sisters, like how each of you took it differently or whatever.
Yeah,
I can't speak for them, and so I don't 100% know what to say. But I think actually what I was just thinking about this morning as I was getting ready was because I've been thinking a lot of negative things, as I'm sure will come out very soon. Lots of like as I've scanned my past, like all the harnessed kind of like resentment and anger and bitterness all started coming up, and so I was like, oh my gosh, there's a lot there. But one thing that I thought about this morning where I was like, oh, that's so nice, was that my sisters and I are all really different. We just all have very different personalities. We're similar too, but I don't know, we're very different. And so if it wasn't for the church, I don't think we would have hung out together. And because growing up, that's what that was the activity that we did together. We went to church, and even when we weren't going to my dad's church, it was in our blood to you go to church. And so we would find a church, we would go there together. We would like teach Sunday school together. We would go on retreats and camping with the church folks, and those are all really good memories for me. And again, because we were even though we're only 2 years apart, that feels like a generation when you're growing up. And so again, I just don't think we would have been in the same circles unless it was something like church that brought us together. So, so we all did. So to answer your question, like up until a certain age, we all were like, what do you call it? We did all the things we were supposed to do as Christians. But because we're so different, I was the one like you, I think, because I've heard you talk a bit. I feel like we're similar in the sense where, wait, did you say you're the youngest too?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, so I was the one who just agreed, had no problems with all the beliefs and everything, right? Like didn't question anything. My middle sister has always been more confident in questioning things. And so she was questioning things, I think, from an early age. And so she's always had that. So she's always been actually more consistent in that compared to me anyway. And from my perspective, again, can't speak for her, but in my view, she has faith, and she has no problem questioning things. Whereas I just like accepted everything for so long and then like came crashing down. Yeah. And then my oldest sister too, she's a different mix as well. And I think, again, I can't speak for them. Like I think I consider them more private people, but we all reacted similarly, I think, in the beginning, and then we all have done different things. And yeah. So lots of differences, I think. Mm-hmm.
I appreciate too your comment about being an immigrant family and how that immediately provided community and safety and connection and all those things. It's a really positive, a really positive part of it. For sure.
Hugely, which is why I think I was so disappointed when I came into. I'm ordained in a mainline white church, and I was like, oh, we don't eat together, like we don't go to each other's houses. Like I'm confused, because for me Christianity was about being family. So that's been quite it wasn't my upbringing to just go to Sunday service. It was all week long. So that was very different for me to enter into, to start learning about all the different ways that Christianity unfolds for people. But
right. Okay, so you just mentioned there, I don't remember the word, but if you're listening to the podcast, you just did this with your hand where it went up and down like a cutting mark.
Yeah.
So I know, like, for everybody, it's not just one thing. It's never just one thing. But if, as you look back, what were some of the aha moments, the kind of orange spot, look at this differently moments for you?
Yeah, and like this might be one of my longer answers, so I'll be more pithy, I hope, in the future. But because and it's longer because at first when I thought about it, you're right, there are moments where I'm like, oh, that was the thing, that was the huge spot. But the more I thought about it, I was like, oh gosh, no, there really has been years and years and decades of things that happened, and I think that's important to say because because I do sometimes think that for folks who don't go through that, they think that you're being flippant or just one thing happened and you changed your mind or something like that, right? Yeah. Whereas, no, it's been a lifetime of little things, even if I didn't realize it till hindsight. So, for example, one of my, looking back, I didn't know it in the moment, but one of my first, I think, spot moments was when I was really young, like I want to say 7, 5, I don't know, something like that. And I don't know if it was in a Bible or like a service or something. Anyway, there was some kind of teaching for some reason that was being talked about in my family at that point, where it was about you have to love God more than anybody. And so that, like, whoever was preaching this or something, that was really emphasizing to us, like, even more than your parents, like, God has to be first. And I just remember being like, like I just felt this feeling of, I'm already getting emotional. I should have brought tissues. I think because when you think about, like, God, to tell a child that is so messed up. But yeah, so they're like, you have to love God more than your parents. And so I remember just thinking, like, oh, shoot, like inside, like
Yeah.
that's not true for me.
Yeah.
Like I love my parents more. So just that, and but for me, because I was like, oh, you just do what you're told. I was like, okay, I gotta figure out a way to do that. I have to love God more than my parents. So I don't know, it was interesting. Yeah, I just was trying. I was trying to make my feeling toward God as stronger than my feeling toward my parents, and it just so again, hindsight, it's things like that where you're like, God, that does not make sense. But in the moment, I just tried to make it work. Like, and again, I wouldn't have realized it then, but I think I began lying to myself, right? Yeah. So if somebody asked me, yeah, I love God more than my parents, even though it's not true. So yeah, and then you do mental gymnastics, which I feel like theology is like mental gymnastics. So I think eventually I got to the point of realizing, oh wait, like, I don't know, somehow being like, well, loving my parents is loving God, so I am loving, that kind of a thing. You just find a way to make it work. But so that's just an example of hindsight splot that I didn't know as it was happening. The bigger other splots, interestingly, so there's little things like that. Then I feel like I went to a really conservative, I went to Pepperdine, which is based in a very conservative Christian denomination, but it's a fun university, so it's like a weird mix. But when I was there, so my social group were like super, super evangelical Christians, and so and that's where I fit in and everything. But I would say and so they were pretty conservative, because like Pepperdine doesn't, like, the denomination doesn't, women can't preach, like you can't use instruments, that kind of a thing. So I didn't have very many splots there. I think it was like this bubble. But then when I left Pepperdine that next year, even when I lived in Korea for a year, and I went to like a huge church over there. But then I started getting introduced to, I would say, the kind of people who are completely in conservative Christianity, but they start to like liberalize certain topics. So like divorce is a big one, where it's like, there's more said about divorce in the Bible than being gay, and yet that one, because people do it, they were able to like find a way to make it okay, right? Yeah. And then women in leadership. I remember going to a seminar workshop in Korea based on this conservative guy, this Christian leader's book, like Why Not Woman, and him giving all the biblical answers for why women can be leaders. So those were splots of like starting to be able to change your belief on certain topics. And then seminary was a huge one. Like if I had gone to, a lot of my friends wanted me to go to a more conservative school, but for some reason, something in me, I was just like, hey, this is the most important thing in my life. Like, why can't it be challenged? Like, because I went to Duke, which was considered by my social circle, one person emailed me, like, it's not Christian, like they're liberal, like all this stuff. And I was like, what? But it's a respected institution. So I was like, well, I was like, my faith shouldn't have, there's nothing to be scared of. If what we know is true, there's nothing to be scared of. Nothing, nothing anybody brings up is gonna rattle me, which was not true. Because
I was gonna say, good for you. Like that's a good stance to be able to take.
Yeah.
When you have been approaching things that way, to be able to say like, bring it on.
Yeah, I'm surprised actually looking at that, because I thought I was much more meeker then, but yeah, there was something in me that was like, if this is what I'm going to give my life to, because that's what I wanted to do, like I wanted to be a nun and all that kind of stuff, then I better know what I'm talking about. I better really believe all of this. And so there was something in me that did want to be challenged on all of my beliefs. And so before I left for seminary, my dad said to me, the first year, like something like the first year, you're going to have so much fun. You're going to like learn all these new things. It'll be so interesting. The second year, you're going to lose your faith. and then the third year it'll come back all together. And I remember when he said that, I was like, I'm not gonna lose my faith. Like, oh my gosh. But then, yeah, it was everything was correct except for the last year. Like, and the spots that did it were learning about church history, like learning about all the humanness of it all, learning about how doctrines were actually decided upon, like reading all those arguments on it was this guy, and then this guy won, and suddenly it's the only answer that can be true. Like learning the language, learning Hebrew, learning Greek, and realizing, so I was a Bible believing, every single word is inspired by God type of believer. And then when you learn the language, you're like, oh, the original manuscript, because there's so many, but didn't have punctuation, so somebody put that in. Like you look at the old scrolls, and they have all these like written things on the sides of the people who were copying them, like the monks and stuff, being like, oh, this might be wrong here, we think this means this, and learning about the stories where it's obvious bad editing, because you're like, oh, they actually messed up. They brought these two stories together, and you can tell because of this, that, and the other. There's a mistake here because this was actually one of the moments for me. Again, I don't retain facts very well in my head sometimes, but it was the story of where Jesus, they're like gonna kill him, and so he runs, I don't know, around through like this near a cliff or something. There's all these pigs. Anyway, the distance that he ran, it's miswritten, and so it would have been like miles and miles and miles. Like it doesn't make any sense. So things like that, where you're just like, oh, it's odd. There's so much human error. There's so the ability to believe that it's like a perfectly written word of God. I couldn't reconcile that anymore. So, but one of my big moments was I think this was my second year, and me and another classmate in my year went to get dinner or something like that at these two guys' upper years, just to like chat or whatever. I know it sounds like we were like it wasn't romantic. We just really were literally like geeky, just wanted to talk about theology. So I think we like ate at one of their apartments, and then we started talking about this and that, and she was super conservative like me, and we thought everybody kind of believed the same thing. And then they started basically like kind of like slowly telling us how they don't believe there's hell, and they don't think there's a devil, and I just remember like her and I both were just like, it was as if, I don't know, it was as if like, I don't even know how to explain the feeling of what, like, I thought we all were the same, and like, it was like, like I guess in the olden days what a person would have felt like talking to a heretic or something. You're just like, oh my God, like I cannot believe you're going to be a minister, and so we left that conversation, and I remember she was like saying to me like, Bethel, like, I don't remember how she said it, but it was basically the essence of they're bad, like stay away, like that's terrible that they think that, and just forget that kind of a thing. And she, went along that trajectory, and I was like, yeah, it's wrong, it's terrible. But I just remember something in me being like, oh, what? Like it just started to open something up. Like, oh, these two guys that I respect and are really thoughtful. If somebody who, is very thoughtful and they are kind people, if they believe something different, I do like pause and think like, huh. Mm-hmm. And so it really did start shifting things for me. So lots of moments like that. And the last two that I'll mention, because they were big, was the LGBTQ change of mind frame, because again, I don't know what it is, but that's just one of the areas of belief that as long as you cling to A, you're allowed to stay in this circle, but as soon as you go B, you have to leave. It's like this weird big moment shift for a lot of people. So that was another one. That was a big exploration, everything. Like, I read lots of different books, and I talked to lots of different people, and then just the experience of being in relationship with people that I adore, all the things that made it harder and harder to hold on to the belief that it was a sin. And one of my internships at a church, like the pastor and his wife, who were awesome people, I think they both had siblings who were gay. And so then they had me and Dave watch Before the Bible Told Me So, that and yeah, that it really did rock my world, because it, again, this like different way of interpreting things, another way of looking at things, everything I thought was one way not being so anymore. So that was a big one. And then the final thing is that I think this was the second year or third year, I was chosen to be one of the students who got to go on this amazing Middle East trip, where we went to like 5 different countries, and amazing, like, and they would pick seminary students from 5 different seminaries, and that's half of the group, and then the other half were like professionals in the real world, and they would just mix us all up because it was all about having conversation.
Interesting.
Yeah, and I really went there hoping, so theologically you have the spectrum there, and I was in a place where I was like, I don't know where I am anymore, and I really went there hoping that by going to, like, you know, the Holy Land, you know, the place, going to the place where Jesus was, that I'd have this spiritual experience or revival within myself, and I would like believe again. And the opposite happened for lots of reasons, but I mean, for me, we'd go to these sites and I would think that I was going to have an experience, and instead I was like, oh my God, it's just commercial. Like, there's just vendors selling souvenirs, and it's just probably not even the site. And it was the opposite feeling that I'd get. And our leader was this amazing Muslim man, like the local tour guide. And so the whole time I'm like, wait, we're telling ourselves that we're better than him. We're telling ourselves that, like, we got it right and he doesn't have it right. Like, he's so peaceful, he's so kind. So it just doesn't, it did. That was kind of one of the final, well, no, it's been ongoing, but that was another big splat moment for me. Yeah.
I wonder how many people start having these moments in seminary. Do you know? Like, it's just like an interesting place where I think I appreciate your perspective on, like, you went there with this intention, and then it was there that things kind of started, opening up. I hope seminary does do that.
Yeah. I think that if you do go to a more academically geared school, I do think that tends to happen more, because you start to, because it is a little bit more like, they're not going to try to cover up, I don't know. I mean, it's like, I felt like I was going through that all by myself. Like, everybody else seemed fine to me. So that's how it felt. And you know what? I used to think that it was about going to an academic school, but actually, I have learned from some folks who go to the local school here, Regent, that is, in my mind, more conservative. They say that the same thing happens. So I don't know, but I do think that I think the majority of the students that were my peers became ministers and are still ministers. I think the majority become progressive. I think it's hard to stay really, really, really conservative after you go through a program like mine, but it's interesting. Like, so for instance, even the LGBTQ issue, I started exploring a change of belief while I was at seminary. And so, for example, there was even like a group of allies that would meet and have speakers come, and it was really small. Like, so I went to a gathering and it was like 5 people. It was like 2 professors. You know, it was really small, and none of my other classmates like went. And so I left at divinity school like pretty sure that everybody else still believed it was a sin, especially because some of the most respected professors at Duke still have that belief. So, and then like a year or two later, via social media, like I saw like everybody was supporting now. Like, it was really interesting. And even somebody who, in their words, was closeted while there was so shocked. They're like, whoa, I had no idea that everybody, like, cause you didn't think so. Cause there so I do think that everybody went through change. And then a lot of people came out, who we had no idea who we were who were our classmates, things like that. So I do think a lot of people go through a lot of change, but I have a feeling that most people still retain their faith. And I think one of the reasons is I went to school in North Carolina, and so a lot of people aren't from the West Coast who went to school there. And so where they live, Christianity is still really big. It's still trending. It's still a part of community. It's still a normal thing to do. Whereas the West Coast, it's not so much. So I think that makes a big difference when your churches are still big. There's still lots of people coming, you have all the funding.
I think it's important too, what you just said, to remember that people are changing all around you, even if you don't see it. Or
yes,
even if you
that's
think,
so true.
even if you think someone's on a path that you used to be on and now you're not. I feel like I've had that happen to me where I've made some assumptions about people that I knew and assumed they were on this a different path, and then to find out, oh, you're open to changing too. And I've caught myself a couple of times.
That's a really good point.
Point to remember that you just never know what people are thinking of in the midst of what they're doing.
So true. I think even outside of seminary or whatnot, I definitely know folks who have stayed that I grew up with who I don't think their faith has changed all that much, but I have had the experience you're talking about as well, like where, like one of the sad things I think about losing your faith is, for me anyway, I lost the thing that clearly told me who I was friends with. So like, so even when I moved to Canada, there were a group of people that Dave knew who were like the churchy people. And I remember when I first met them, I was like, oh, this is who I would have been friends with. Like, it would have been so easy. As soon as I came, if we believed the same thing, they would like me, I would like them, it would just work. And I didn't have that anymore. I couldn't do that anymore. And I didn't have friends. Like, I didn't know who to be friends with. But all to say that those people who were super, super conservative, kind of alarmingly so sometimes, some of them, a lot of them now, 12 years later, have changed drastically, and I never would have expected that. So yeah, I agree. It's you never know. That's a really good point. You never know. Yeah.
Hey Eastlake, Peter here. Thanks so much for tuning in to watch this message. I wanted to do just a quick interruption to say thank you to so many of you who are making regular contributions to Eastlake. Eastlake is a nonprofit, and everything that we do is because of a community of consistent and generous people who really believe in this place and want to see it continue. So if you're a part of that community, thank you for how you make this place go. If you are tuning in regularly and are part of this community but you haven't yet jumped in to making a financial contribution, we would encourage you to do that and encourage you to go to eastlakecc.com to help support Eastlake as a community and continue to make these messages possible. Thanks so much for letting me interrupt your message. Let's jump back in.
When things were shifting for you when you were at Duke, you kind of mentioned you weren't sure. I'm going to ask though, just to be sure. Do you remember what it felt like? Like, were you panicking? Or did it feel like stepping close to freedom? Like, what was some of the overall feelings that you had?
Oh my God, it did not feel like stepping close to freedom at all. I think it's taken a decade to feel that way. And even now, it's still really hard. Oh gosh, tissues, I'm gonna need more tissues. It felt, oh my goodness, why am I so emotional right now? It felt so hard. It was like, there's like a psalm that says like something about crying in my pillow every night or something, like drenching your pillow with tears. And that's what my seminary days were. Like I was a perfectionist and I wanted to get A's, and so I was studying all the time, and it was really hard, the workload. So I think sleep deprivation definitely played a part. But yeah, like for sure there were months where I was crying like almost every night because it was everything I knew. It definitely felt like you were on completely solid ground, and then there was like a huge earthquake, and now it's just cracks everywhere. And for me personally, I don't know psychologically what this is, but I feel like it's the closest thing to having a imaginary friend or something. I don't know what that was like. So as a kid, I never had imaginary friends other than God. So so God and I were so close, and God was so real, and I could feel, and for me it was a him then, so I could feel him. I could feel him. I would talk to him all the time. Like, it was just this presence that I think I created, but that was in my psyche. And during seminary, when all of the beliefs started just rocking and rolling, it was gone. It was like now when I spoke to God, there was nothing there. It was just a void. There was no closeness. There was no, that feeling of having that person, just so intimate, such an intimate relationship. It was just gone. And so it was really hard. Yeah, it was really hard. It was hard all throughout seminary. Seminary was like kind of torture for me, 3 years, and I constantly thought about leaving. But yeah, it's been so hard, and I think that's important again to talk about, because again, I think sometimes for the people who stay, they think that, we're just like, this party sucks, I'm gonna go to a better party, and it's like, it might be like that one day. I do think it becomes like that. I do think it becomes freedom one day, but the space between leaving and arriving is dark and deep and unknown, and you are basically just losing everything for you don't know what, but because you have to, because like you can't abide by what was anymore.
It just starts falling, like pieces start falling off.
Well, and if when it becomes your choice, like, are you going to stay? Do you want to try to cling to where you are? And if you don't, and so it is a choice to leave at that in a sense, then it feels really hard because what's his name? He spoke at Eastlake. His dad's an evangelical minister.
Bart Campolo.
Yes. He really, I feel like, expressed that well in one of his last talks, where he was how important it was for him to help people realize, like, it would be so much easier for me to stay, especially when you're trained to be like a minister, for example. It's like when that's your inheritance, you're like, I have nothing. Like, if I leave this, I have nothing right now. Like, I have faith and I believe that something can come, but in the moments it just feels like loss. Yeah, it only feels like loss in the moments, but yeah, so you wouldn't do that something that hard unless like you really had to. But yeah, so it felt terrible.
Thank you for being honest and for sharing that. I appreciate that. Thank you. So then tell me now, this might be like a big jump, but where are you at now? Because like you, as you said, like you're a minister still. I mean, at this point, that's a title that you carry. So tell me how things kind of how did you, I don't know if you would say you put something back together, or when did things like start to feel spiritual again, and what did you make of that?
Where am I now? Well, let's see. So when I left seminary and moved to Canada to marry Dave, even at that point, I kind of didn't want to be a Christian anymore. I just didn't want to go to church anymore. I was just like, I don't agree with these folks. Like, why would I continue to go, type of thing? And because I was moving to a new country, like, I would figure, well, here's my chance to do something different. So that was my plan. but then we moved to Victoria, on Vancouver Island, and I couldn't work I had no friends. I had no family. I couldn't work because I didn't have a visa. So I had nothing. Was going a little bit insane. And the church where we got married, which was a United Church, the minister and the children's minister, they're married. The lead minister and the children's minister, and they found out that here was this new person in town who just graduated from Duke, so they were like, oh! and they like totally embraced me, and they're still like mentors and like they're like family to us. They married us, so they embraced me. So it was kind of like the only option that was before me, and so but because of that, I found out about the United Church, which I knew nothing about from the States because I was only in really evangelical circles. And so then here I found out, oh my God, what? There's like denominations that are totally fine with you questioning, or totally fine with you doubting. Women are in leadership. They started ordaining, I'm gonna get all these numbers wrong, but like, I feel like did women get ordained in the 50s or something? I don't know. It was really early compared to other people. And started ordaining gay and lesbian weddings in the 70s or something like that. Anyways,
it's really progressive.
Yeah, it's really progressive. I was like, what, this exists? Like, oh, okay, then like I can. So then that became my new home because of the progressiveness. Mm-hmm. And so lots of things like that have happened over the last 12 years of finding new circles of people or authors or teachers or whatnot who just continue to crack open the space that you feel allowed to be in more and more and more. And so, yeah, that's continued to happen. It hasn't felt like reconstruction. It's felt more like everything just keeps expanding, which is what feels true to me. That feels right. But with that is actually a continuous lack of location. Like everything's just like, and so I don't know. Yeah, it's kind of a confusing time for me right now, because you're right. I'm technically an ordained minister. I'm a chaplain currently at the university here. I run yoga chapel. So what's been hard, here, I'll say it this way. What's been hard is that my perspective on life has continued to expand, but through a lot of different reasons, I've continued to stay in employment and vocation that at the end of the day only lets you evolve so much by its nature. Like that's what an organization does. So I'm now at the place where I'm like, what do I do? Because there are some folks, rare, I think a lot of people think that they're these people, but I actually think this is quite rare. I think there are some rare folks who can belong and transcend. Mm-hmm. I don't know that I'm one of those people. So,
Tell me clarify for people listening, like what do you mean by belong and transcend?
So there's this awesome quote that I'm gonna misquote. Maybe you'll know what it is. It was some kind of like rock band artist person that said it. Like,
no, I for sure don't know what that is.
Okay. You might. It's a good one. It's something like, religion is the blanket that we throw over the mystery to try to give it some shape. Something like that. Yeah, it's something like, that's what religion is the blanket that we throw over the mystery to try to just understand it, to give it a little shape. I think that's true. I think what happens in religions is that when you do that, if you're a leader or a minister or like of that religion, you get like put under the blanket as well. Mm-hmm. And I think that for, again, my perspective, who knows what's going on, like we said, in people's minds, but for my perspective, my assumption is that most of those folks really like being there. Like,
Yeah.
being
It's kind of safe. Yeah, they know what to expect. It's safe.
Yeah, being under the blanket. Well, and I genuinely think they love it. Like, being under the blanket makes them feel special, makes them feel close to the mystery. Folks like me now, anyway, maybe I used to be that kind of person over 10 years ago, but I feel like I can't breathe. Like, I feel like suffocated. And I feel a bit angry, I think, because I'm like, oh, well, the blanket can only ever go over a piece of the mystery. So it's all outside too, but we're just focused. Actually, we're not just even focused on the mystery under, like, we're focused on the blanket. Like, that's where all our attention's going. And so, so I just want to, like, run. I want to escape. I'm, like, pulling on the threads. What I mean by belong and transcend is I do think there's some people who can be under the blanket and not feel suffocated, like, who know that the mystery is beyond the blanket, and so they feel really good about being under the blanket and being the kind of person that is always reminding people, like, hey, remember, mystery is beyond. Yeah, there's more. This isn't it. But I just don't think maybe I'm that type of person. I don't know if it's a personality thing or what, but I do feel suffocated, and this is kind of probably be maybe offensive. I'm just trying to think. I try to, like, do, like, a quick, like, filter, but okay. But this is just honestly how I feel. Okay.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
and especially being, because you interviewed a couple other people who were vocationally Christians,
Yes.
but what it kind of feels like for me lately is it feels like as if, okay, so if I was, so, remember the Atkins diet? Okay, so say that you were an employee of there was like a division, it was like a company all about Atkins, and you were an employee there, and you totally believed everything about it. You totally thought it was the best way to health and everything. So you're in there, you're doing it, you're loving it, and over time, you, through research and all this other stuff, through your own experience, you realize, oh, no, like, plant-based is better, or whatever, right? Some other diet is actually healthier than this. I actually don't believe this anymore. But you're a representative for them, like, you're supposed to advertise them, and so you start to feel disconnect with all that. And I think what would happen in that situation for a person like that is you start to resent the people around you. You start to get annoyed about them talking about Atkins because you're like, no, I don't, and so
There's more out there.
Yeah. But I guess I just wonder if it's sometimes you need the distance in order to have the grace. Like, I feel like, again, there's, like, beautiful things and beautiful people within Christianity. I think I'm getting frustrated because I just don't feel like I belong in it in the way I have been, and so I want to look at those folks graciously, and I feel like I need more space in order to do that. So that's and what I had been trying to do for the last 5 years for sure is or maybe longer, 7 years, I've been trying to be a person who could just belong and transcend. Like, you can belong and not feel suffocated, and I don't know, it hasn't worked for me. So that's
I love that analogy, that blanket, because I feel like not even vocationally, but people who just have fit under there, and that's been their realm of trying to understand a spiritual world or a spiritual perspective. And there's some people who really like that and feel like it fulfills them and gives them understanding. And there's some people who just want to get out. And so I think people will resonate with that for sure.
Yeah. And I was so trained to, because even though Duke is liberal, it's Orthodox, and so my entire, like, whatever, schooling, training, education, I know all the answers to, like, from the beginning, we were trained to be smug and look down on anybody who said, like, spiritual but not religious. We're like, ugh, they don't understand how important religion, like, I have all the answers for the religion side of things. Like, I know what I'm supposed to think and what I know what somebody would say back to me. But again, over the years, I've tried to believe that. I've tried to believe, religion is so important, and it's not enough to be spiritual. And I'm like, oh, but I'm not finding that to be true from my experience anymore. I'm still grateful to religion, but Stan gave that really helpful example about religion being like hospitals. So it's not the only thing there, but there's no reason why we should turn away from them. They're really important. And that was really helpful for me for a while, and I agreed to it to a point. But the difference, one of the big differences with religion is that, like, hospitals respect all science. Religions don't have to. And that's just a big, I feel like that's a problem. And I don't know. Yeah, all the things that I know I'm supposed to believe and I'm supposed to be on this side of the argument about, like, even like people who are like, oh, well, science is about the what, religion's about the why. I'm like, but there's so many other non-religious what's the right word? Not industries, but like even like psychology or just deep thinkers and philosophy that talk about why, I think, actually in bigger and broader ways than religion sometimes does. So yeah, it's hard for me to stay somewhere where there's like a ring around the truth. Yeah.
So tell me about what you just mentioned. So I'm watching the clock too. We're gonna run out of time, but I wanted to hear so what does spirituality look like for you now? You just mentioned some of the deep thinkers and the psychology and like those kind of things. Like, what do you spend your time in now that kind of, I don't know if something does, but like feeds that part of you? What like spurs you on towards meaning and purpose and love in what you found now?
A lot of things. Like, I'll start by saying that when I heard you ask a couple people the question of that line in your book, the children's book, of like, what's that final line about? My house is my dreams or something.
Yeah,
the matches.
It looks like all my dreams. Yeah,
looks like all my dreams. And you ask them, is that true for you? My heart would ache when I would hear you ask that question. Because it's not true for me. What's true for me is that. To bring it back to the book, is that the inside of my house matches my dreams. My outside still looks like the street I'm supposed to be on. So I'm still living a divided life, and I'm working on that a lot. I'm working on it. I'm seeing a therapist. I'm doing all the things. I'm working on it. But in terms of the inside, like what's going on in the inside is, like I say, there are so many, like, again, great things I can say about wisdom traditions and religion and the things that they offer us. I just don't like it when they're bordered up or there's like a line around them. And so for me, like reading all kinds of different philosophical thinkers, reading different teachers from different traditions, different movement stuff. Like, I just, every industry, every type of earnest, like, human thinking and experience that's out there that has, I glean from all of it. I glean you can call it practices or spiritual practices from all of it. What kind of practices or spiritual practices? I mean, I did a whole series about like some practices, and even in that you might be able to tell that I'm like weaving lots of different things together. But so, for example, like the practice of reframing, which, even though I think Jesus was a master reframer, it's not really talked about in Christianity, like in that way. And so I really learned about reframing through like Stoic thinking, through Byron Katie's work, through like Gabor Mate, like just other types of thinkers out there. So Sam Harris, I learned about reframing stuff from him. So things like that, like reframing. Again, Christianity is kind of has been kind of terrible as a tradition in being integrated with your body. You're kind of just taught to hate your body and think that it's like the source of bad things. So lots of work to get away from that, and that's all from non-Christian sources. So, but like, yeah, lots of practice, lots of meditation, lots of again. And I liked how you and somebody was talking about how a lot of practices you are kind of the same thing but with a different name. But I do think they're different, like for me. So to me, praying to like an interventionist God is different than meditation, even though they have similarities. And I lean toward one now, right? Like it's the other one doesn't really do it for anymore, but there are similar strings. So there's so all the things I did within Christianity, I probably still do in a different way. And then now I get like 90% more stuff. I'd say, yeah. The things that were, like Christianity would have said, no, don't do that one though. Like, don't do that practice. Including yoga, which is a big part of my life. So yeah, I just think there's so much. I feel like there's so much good teaching and thought. And I really try to learn from a whole spectrum of folks and leaders and teachers. I even folks I think I'm going to really disagree with, or who people hate for whatever reason because they said one thing that people disagree with. I listen to them if they have something to say, and I learn from all of them, and really good stuff. So I don't really have limits to who I'll get a teaching practice, new way of looking at things. So that's a big part.
That specific attitude, I think, is the biggest shift that happens in people who kind of go through this process, is an opening up to trusting yourself to hear and think, and not being scared to read or listen to something that used to be kind of like off limits, or, that I think has been one of the biggest shifts for me, is I don't have fear about what I'm going to hear or see or think. Yeah. Whereas so much of my faith heritage was a lot of fear of sticking to the truth. And
right.
So,
yeah. I was going to ask you, because I think is this the last one of this?
Yes. I actually hope that I'll do more like for later in the year, but for this part of the series, yeah.
Okay. Because I just wanted to, you can cut this out if you want to, but I was just wondering, as a final question to you, I wanted to ask, like from the interviews you've done now, like is there any kind of pattern or, like that, like something that you're like, wow, that stood out to you, just in general? And then I was curious, has it made you think about your own journey any differently, or given you any epiphany or anything like that?
Well, thank you for asking. I think actually what you said at the beginning of today was, it kind of deeply, I felt agreement with you of talking to, like, there's a tendency for me to look back and I see the hard things first. I see the difficulties and the pain.
Oh, jeez.
My dog, sorry. I thought that might happen.
There's a dog out in the hallway. Okay.
But then really looking back, and I'm finding myself really thankful for the journey and the hard parts, and finding the good in all of that. So I'm thankful for that. I think kind of some of the themes that I've seen are fear and courage. It just takes a lot of courage to be able to step out.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think I'm doing some reframing. Hopefully we can have more conversations like this. But thank you. Thanks for being a part of our team and for sharing today, like, so honestly and openly. I really am thankful. Thank you for your time.
Well, thank you. And thank you for everybody who's listening. I'm really sorry if I sound resentful. I'm going through the change currently, like another leap. And so it's lots of tension right now, but I do think that gets released. And if it's okay, the final thing I'll say, just because if it could be helpful to somebody, I finally found a therapist that, like, I really resonate with, and she's helping me through a lot of this. And this might sound so funny, but she gave me an example recently that I just found really helpful. And again, I'm surprisingly dealing with a lot more anger and resentment and bitterness than I was expecting, as I'm starting to like think about what this next season of my life is going to be like, and what my relationship to the church will be like or won't be like. And I told her how like I hate feeling this way. I hate feeling bitter toward anybody. I don't like, I hate it. I just want to move to Zen so fast. Like, it makes me like feel like such a terrible person. It makes me feel like I must be doing the wrong thing because I shouldn't feel this way. She gave me the funniest metaphor that was helpful to me, where she was like, you know, like if you wear a shoe that's too small, first comes like the discomfort, and then comes the pain, and then it gets numb. And some people just stay there. She goes, but when you take it off, it actually stays numb at first, and then the pain comes, like and then, you know, and then the freedom. But she was like, that pain part is really important, and she's like, if you don't go through that, that would be weird. And she's like, you need to feel all those feelings. They need to come up, otherwise you're just pushing them down somewhere. And so that was just very, very, very helpful to me. Instead of shaming myself, which I was about to do, she was like, no. She's like, feel all the feelings, feel the bitterness, feel the resentment, feel the anger, and then you have to release that in order to like move forward. But yeah, just thought that was really helpful.
I do feel like that's helpful. And I feel like each person in this series has talked about certain kind of aspects of the journey. And so I hope people are listening to put it all together, because what you just said is a really important part of the journey. And there's, I don't want to only talk about like why this is so great and why we all feel so much better, because that's not true all the time. And so I hope that's not the theme that has come up, but I appreciate you sharing that so authentically. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thanks
I'm looking forward to talking to you soon.
Okay, you too. Bye-bye.
This is where we've grown. Don't forget how far we've come. Remember.
Thank you for joining us. To make a donation, head to eastlakecc.com/donate.